To order, Senator Risa Ontiveros will lead the chamber in prayer.
Mahal na Panginoon, napakaraming bumabagabag sa aming mga kalooban bilang isang sambayanan, bilang mga individual sa pagsimula muli ng aming sesyon ngayong linggo na kailangan naming hingian ng karunungan at konsolasyon mula sa inyo. Nandoon ang pambihirang kaganapan sa isang hiwalay at kapantay na sangay ng pamahalaan na ipinangangamba ng marami kung ano ang implikasyon noon sa aming mga institusyon at kultura ng demokrasya. Nandoon ang biglang pagkamatay ng isang pinakamamahal na ama ng aming minamahal na kasama na si Sonny Angara. Mahal na kaibigan ng ilan sa amin, iginagalang na kasama naming lahat sa hanay ng mga mambabatas. At marami pang ibang panganib at sugat. Sa gitna ng mga laban at pagkaulilang ito, ipinapanalangin namin ang Prayer of St. Francis na inawit sa necrological service ni dating Senate President Edgardo Angara. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. O Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen.
Amen. Secretary, please call the roll.
The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Dilima, Drilon, Ejercito, Escudero, Gatchalian, Gordon, Honasan, Ontiveros, Lacson, Ligarda, Pacquiao, Pangilinan, Po, Recto, Soto, Trillanes, Villanueva, Villar, Subiri, Senate President Pimentel.
With 19 senators present, the chair declares the presence of a quorum. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we dispense with the reading of the journals of the 29th session, October 4, 5, 6, 9, 10, and 11, 2017. 71st session, Tuesday, March 20, 2018. 72nd session, Wednesday, March 21, 2018. And the 73rd session, Tuesday, May 15, 2018, and consider the same as approved.
Is there any objection to the motion of the Majority Leader, which concerns 1, 2, 3, 4? 4 journals. Okay, hearing none, the motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. We'd like to acknowledge our guests in the gallery. We have the Bachelor of Arts in English Language Studies students from the University of Santo Tomas, headed by Assistant Professor Emil Sarmago and Assistant Professor Michelle Desierto, and the guests of Senator Loren, Mayor Sally Lee of Sorsogon City, Sorsogon, Mr. President.
Welcome to all of our guests. We should be careful, Majority Leader, we should be careful with our English this afternoon. Our
yes,
visitors are English majors.
Might interest them to know that I am one.
That's correct, that's correct.
Mr. President, may I move that the reference of business be done at a later time, as there are two bills on third reading that I believe would need the presence of all the members of the Senate.
Any objection to the motion? Hearing none, approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to consider for third reading Senate Bill 1527 under Committee Report 136.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, we move to consider the said measure.
May we request the Secretary to read the title of the measure?
An act recognizing the British School Manila as an educational institution of international character, granting certain prerogatives conducive to its development as such and for other purposes.
Mr. President, printed copies of the measure. The Minority Leader is disturbing me, Mr. President.
Minority Leader?
The printed copies of the measure were distributed last March 22, 2018, thereby complying with the three-day rule. So I therefore move to vote on third and final reading, Senate Bill 1527, through a roll call vote.
Any objection? Okay, hearing none. Motion is approved and the Secretary will conduct the roll call vote.
The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, De Lima, Drilon, Ejercito, Escudero, Gatchalian, Gordon, Honasan, Monteveros, Lacson, Ligarda, Pacquiao, Pangilinan, Po, Recto, Soto, Trillanes, Villanueva, Villar, Soberi, Senate President Pimentel.
With 18 affirmative votes, 0 negative vote, Senate Bill number 1527 is approved on third reading.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to consider for third reading Senate Bill 1532 under Committee Report 142.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
May we request the Secretary to read the title of the measure?
An act providing benefits and programs to strengthen, promote, and develop the Philippine startup ecosystem.
Mr. President, printed copies of the measure were distributed last March 22, 2018, thereby complying with the three-day rule. I therefore move to vote on third and final reading, Senate Bill 1532 through a roll call vote.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved. Secretary will conduct the roll call vote.
The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, De Lima, Drilon, Ejercito, Escudero, Gatchalian, Gordon, Honasan, Monteveros, Lacson, Ligarda, Pacquiao, Pangilinan, Po, Recto, Soto, Trillanes, Villanueva, Villar, Soberi, Senate President Pimentel.
With 18 affirmative votes, 0 negative votes, Senate Bill number 1532 is approved on third reading.
Mr. President, I move that we proceed now with the reference of business.
Any objection? Hearing none, motion is approved.
Bills on first reading. 1764, an act establishing a Philippine Sovereign Wealth Fund, providing for the management, investment, and use of proceeds of its assets, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes. Senator Joseph Victor Ejercito.
Referred to the Committees on Economic Affairs, Government Corporations and Public Enterprises, Ways and Means, and Finance.
17666, an act increasing the monthly pension of senior veterans. Senator Honasan II.
To the Committees on National Defense and Security and Finance.
1767, an act changing the name of Lupon School of Fisheries in Lupon, Davao Oriental to the Davao Oriental Polytechnic Institute. Senator Joel Villanueva.
The Committee on Rules.
1768, an act increasing the bed capacity of Governor Celestino Gallaris Memorial Hospital in Tagbilaran City, Province of Bohol, from 225 to 525 beds and upgrading its services and facilities, amending for the purpose of Republic Act Number 7266 and appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes. Senator Joseph Victor Ejercito.
To the Committee on Rules.
Committee reports. Committee report number 334, submitted by the Committee on Local Government on House Bill number 5259, introduced by Representatives Bagilat and Premises Agabas, entitled An Act declaring June 18 of every year a special non-working holiday in the province of Ifugao in commemoration of its founding anniversary, to be known as the Ifugao Foundation Day, recommending its approval without amendment. Senator Sani Angara.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee Report 335, submitted by the Committee on Local Government on House Bill number 5260, introduced by Representative Alonte et al., entitled An Act declaring February 3 of every year a special non-working holiday in the city of Binyan, province of Laguna, to be known as Binyan Liberation Day, recommending its approval without amendment. Senator Sani Angara.
Calendar for ordinary business.
Committee Report number 336, submitted by the Committee on Local Government on House Bill number 5262, introduced by Representative Nava et al., entitled An Act declaring May 22 of every year a special non-working holiday in the province of Guimaras in commemoration of its anniversary as a province, recommending its approval without amendment. Senator Sani Angara.
Calendar for ordinary business.
Committee Report number 337, submitted by the Committee on Local Government on House Bill number 5551, introduced by Representative Salcida et al., entitled An Act declaring September 2 of every year a special non-working holiday in the province of Albay, including the cities therein, in commemoration of the birth anniversary of General Simeon A. Ola, to be known as Simeon Ola Day, recommending its approval without amendment. Senator Sani Angara.
Calendar for ordinary business.
Committee Report number 338, submitted by the Committee on Local Government on House Bill number 5552, introduced by Representative Salcida et al., entitled An Act declaring April 3 of every year a special non-working holiday in the province of Albay, including the cities therein, in commemoration of its founding anniversary, to be known as Albay Day, recommending its approval without amendment. Senator Sani Angara.
Calendar for ordinary business.
Committee Report number 339, submitted by the Committee on Local Government on House Bill number 5553, introduced by Representatives Bagilat and Premises Agabas, entitled An Act declaring September 2 of every year a special non-working holiday in the province of Ifugao in commemoration of the surrender of General Tomoyoki Yamashita, commander of the Japanese Imperial Army in the Philippines, in Kiangan, Ifugao, recommending its approval without amendment. Senator Sani Angara.
Calendar for ordinary business.
Committee Report number 340, submitted by the Committee on Local Government on House Bill number 5554, introduced by Representatives Bagao and Premises Agabas, entitled An Act declaring December 9 of every year a special working holiday in the province of the Nagat Islands in commemoration of the birth anniversary of Ruben Edera Ecleo Sr., recommending its approval without amendment. Senator Sani Angara.
Calendar for ordinary business.
Committee Report number 341, submitted by the Committee on Local Government on House Bill number 55555, introduced by Representatives Gonzales and Premises Agabas, entitled An Act declaring June 15 of every year a special non-working holiday in the province of Pampanga and Angeles City, to be known as the Mount Pinatubo Memorial Day, recommending its approval without amendment. Senator Sani Angara.
Calendar for ordinary business.
Committee Report number 342, submitted by the Committee on Local Government on House Bill number 5562, introduced by Representative Batawil et al., entitled An Act declaring April 5 of every year a special non-working holiday in the province of Pangasinan in commemoration of its founding anniversary, to be known as the Pangasinan Day, recommending its approval without amendment, Senator Sani Angara.
Calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 343, submitted by the Committee on Local Government on House Bill number 5563, introduced by Representative Roman et al., entitled An Act declaring April 21 of every year a special non-working holiday in the municipality of Orani, province of Bataan, in commemoration of its founding anniversary to be known as Orani Foundation Day, recommending its approval without amendment. Senator Sani Angara.
Calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 344, submitted by the Committee on Local Government on House Bill number 5564, introduced by Representatives Vergara and Premisas Agabas, entitled An Act Declaring February 3 of every year a special non-working holiday in the city of Cabanatuan, province of Nueva Ecija, in commemoration of its founding anniversary, recommending its approval without amendment. Senator Sani Angara.
Calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 345, submitted by the Committee on Local Government on House Bill number 5565, introduced by Representative Acosta et al., entitled An Act Declaring January 24 of every year a special non-working holiday in the province of Palawan and the city of Puerto Princesa in honor of the martyrdom of Governor Higinio Acosta Mendoza Sr., to be known as Governor Higinio Acosta Mendoza Sr. Day, recommending its approval without amendment. Senator Sani Angara.
Calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 346, submitted by the Committee on Local Government on House Bill number 5566, introduced by Representative Almonte et al., entitled An Act Declaring November 2 of every year a special non-working holiday in the province of Misamis Occidental in commemoration of its founding anniversary to be known as Araw ng Misamis Occidental, recommending its approval without amendment. Senator Sani Angara.
Calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 347, submitted by the Committee on Local Government on House Bill number 5638, introduced by Representative Sarmiento and Premisas Agabas, entitled An Act Declaring November 28 of every year a special non-working holiday in the municipality of Santa Margarita, province of Samar, in commemoration of its founding anniversary to be known as the Santa Margarita Foundation Day, recommending its approval without amendment. Senator Sani Angara.
Calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 348, submitted by the Committee on Local Government on House Bill number 5639, introduced by Representative Sarmiento and Premisas Agabas, entitled An Act Declaring October 16 of every year a special non-working holiday in the city of Calbayog, province of Samar, in commemoration of its Charter Day anniversary to be known as the Calbayog City Charter Day, recommending its approval without amendment. Senator Sani Angara.
Calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 349, submitted by the Committee on Local Government on House Bill number 5640, introduced by Representatives Go and Premisas Agabas, entitled An Act Declaring September 3 of every year a special non-working holiday in the city of Baguio, province of Benguet, in commemoration of the surrender of the Japanese military forces led by General Tomoyuki Samashita in Baguio City, recommending its approval without amendment. Senator Sani Angara.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 350, submitted by the Committee on Local Government on House Bill number 5641, introduced by Representative Bulilla et al., an act declaring December 1 of every year a special non-working holiday in the municipality of Padre Garcia, province of Batangas, in commemoration of its founding anniversary and annual Kabakaan Festival, recommending its approval without amendment. Sponsor Senator Sani Angara.
Calendar for ordinary business.
351, submitted by the Committee on Local Government on House Bill 5687, introduced by Representative C. Alvarado et al., an act declaring January 23 of every year a special non-working holiday in the province of Bulacan in commemoration of the inauguration of the Philippine Republic, recommending its approval without amendment by Senator Angara.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
352, submitted by the Committee on Local Government on House Bill number 5688, introduced by Representatives Del Mar and Primicias Agabas, an act declaring September 21 every year a special working holiday in the city of Cebu and the entire province of Cebu, including its highly urbanized and compounded cities, to be known as Cebu Press Freedom Day, recommending its approval without amendment. Sponsor Senator Sonny Angara.
Calendar for ordinary business.
353 on House Bill number 5689, introduced by Representatives Fortun and Primicias Agabas, an act declaring August 2 of every year a special non-working holiday in the city of Butuan, province of Agusan del Norte, and commemoration of its Charter Day anniversary to be known as Adlaw Hong Butuan, recommending its approval without amendment. Sponsor Senator Sonny Angara.
Calendar for ordinary business.
354, submitted by the Committee on Local Government on House Bill 5690, introduced by Representative Ortega P. et al., entitled an act declaring March 2 of every year a special non-working holiday in the province of La Union and commemoration of its founding anniversary to be known as La Union Day, recommending its approval without amendment. Sponsor Senator Sonny Angara.
Calendar for ordinary business.
355, submitted by the Committee on Local Government on House Bill number 5691, introduced by Representatives Ramirez Sato and Primicias Agabas, entitled an act declaring November 15 of every year a special non-working holiday in the province of Occidental Mindoro in commemoration of its founding anniversary, recommending its approval without amendment. Sponsor Senator Sonny Angara.
Calendar for ordinary business.
356 on House Bill number 6084, introduced by Representatives Chanco and Primicias Agabas, entitled an act declaring January 16 of every year a special non-working holiday in the city of Navotas in commemoration of its founding anniversary, recommending its approval without amendment. Sponsor Senator Sonny Angara.
Calendar for ordinary business.
357 on House Bill number 6160, introduced by Representatives Avail and Primicias Agabas, an act declaring September 7 of every year a special non-working holiday in the city of Cavite, province of Cavite, in commemoration of its founding anniversary, recommending its approval without amendment. Sponsor Senator Sonny Angara.
Calendar for ordinary business.
358, submitted by the Committee on Local Government on House Bill 6161, introduced by Representative Duabit et al., entitled an act declaring January 21 of every year special non-working holiday in the municipality of Rodriguez, province of Rizal, and commemoration of the birth anniversary of the Honorable Euloyo Amang Adon Rodriguez Sr., recommending its approval without amendment by Senator Sonny Angara.
Calendar for ordinary business.
359, submitted by the Committee on Local Government on House Bill 6239, introduced by Representative Gomez et al., an act declaring November 5 of every year a special non-working holiday in the city of Ormoc, province of Leyte, to be known as Ormoc Flash Flood Memorial Day, recommending its approval without amendment by Senator Sonny Angara.
Calendar for ordinary business.
360, submitted by the Committee on Local Government on House Bill number 6178, introduced by Representative Roman et al., entitled an act declaring January 11 every year a special non-working holiday in the province of Bataan, in commemoration of its founding anniversary to be known as Bataan Foundation Day, recommending its approval without amendment by Senator Sonny Angara.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
361, submitted by the Committee on Local Government on House Bill number 6418, introduced by Representative Sarmiento et al., an act declaring October 26 of every year a special non-working holiday in the province of Catanduanes to be known as the Foundation Day of Catanduanes, recommending its approval without amendment by Senator Sonny Angara.
Calendar for ordinary business.
362, submitted by the Committee on Local Government on House Bill 6592, introduced by Representative Palma et al., an act declaring February 24 every year a special non-working holiday in the province of Zamboanga, Sibugay, in commemoration of its founding anniversary to be known as Araw ng Sibugay, recommending its approval without amendments. Sponsor Senator Sonny Angara.
Calendar for ordinary business.
363 on House Bill number 6688, introduced by Representatives Relampagos and Primicias Agabas, an act declaring July 4 every year a special non-working holiday in the entire province of Bohol, to be known as Francisco de Godoy Day in honor of Francisco de Godoy, a native of Bohol and leader of the longest Philippine revolt on record that lasted for 85 years during the Spanish era, recommending its approval without amendment by Senator Sonny Angara.
Calendar for ordinary business.
364, submitted by the Committee on Local Government on House Bill 6689, introduced by Representatives Plaza and Primicias Agabas, an act declared June 17 of every year, special non-working holiday in the province of Agusan del Sur in commemoration of its founding anniversary, recommending its approval without amendment, sponsored Senator Sonny Angara.
Calendar for ordinary business.
365, submitted by the Committee on Local Government on House Bill number 6781, introduced by Representative Marquez et al., an act declaring July 31 of every year a special non-working holiday in the municipality of Tangalan, province of Aklan, to be known as Tangalan Day in the commemoration of its creation as a separate municipality from the municipality of Makato, and in honor of the bravery of the hometown heroes of Barangay Vibo who revolted against the Spaniards, recommending its approval without amendment. Sponsor Senator Sonny Angara.
Calendar for ordinary business.
366, submitted by Committee on Local Government on House Bill number 7044, introduced by Representative Gasataya et al., an act declaring June 18 of every year special non-working holiday in the city of Bacolod, province of Negros Occidental, to be known as the Bacolod City's Charter Day, and commemoration of the day President Manuel L. Quezon signed and approved into effect Commonwealth Act number 326, creating the city of Bacolod, recommending its approval without amendment. Sponsor Senator Sonny Angara.
Calendar for ordinary business.
367, prepared and submitted by the Committees on Electoral Reforms and People Participation, and Constitutional Amendments and Prohibition of Codes on Senate Bill number 1765, with Senators Lacson, Drilon, Ejercito, Paul, Ligarda, Aquino Fort, De Lima, and Pangilinan as authors thereof, entitled an act defining and prohibiting political dynasties, providing penalties therefore and for other purposes, recommending its approval, and substitution of Senate Bill numbers 49, 230, 897, 1137, 1258, and 1688, sponsor Senator Pangilinan.
Calendar for ordinary business.
Committee Report number 368, submitted by the Committees on Accountability of Public Officers and Investigations, Health and Demography and Finance. Privileged speech of Senator Richard J. Gordon, delivered on October 11, 2016, on the alleged 3.5 billion worth of questionable dengue vaccines that had been administered by the DOH to 280,000 students without passing through the pre-qualification requirements, and PS Resolution 557 and 563, both on the dengue vaccination program of the Department of Health, by Senators Joseph Victor Ejercito and Grace Poe, respectively, recommending its approval. Sponsor Senator Gordon, dissenting Senator Drilon, with a dissenting report by Senator De Lima and Senators Trillanes de Fort, Ontiveros, Pangilinan, and Aquino de Fort, join the dissent of Senator De Lima.
Mr. President,
What's the pleasure of Senator Lacson?
parliamentary inquiry, Mr.
Go
President.
ahead, sir.
Mr. President, this is just a parliamentary inquiry. Last April 30, 2018, Committee Report number 368 on Dengbaxia was filed by the Blue Ribbon Committee jointly with the Committee on Health and Demography and Committee on Finance. On its face, out of the 22 members of the three committees, 14 signed the report. However, upon perusal of the report, particularly its signature page and its various attachments, this representation noticed that some members of the three committees signed the report with concurring and dissenting votes. In addition, Mr. President, some senators signed with reservations, while Senators Drilon and De Lima, joined by their colleagues in the minority, filed their separate dissenting opinions. Others, or at least this representation, has not signed, Mr. President. I have a couple of issues to raise for the Committee on Rules to resolve. First, may I inquire on the number of signatures needed in support of the committee report for it to be filed with the Bills and Index Division and considered for floor deliberation. Are those signing with concurring and dissenting opinions counted in determining the majority? How about those signing with reservations? The second issue, Mr. President, is in cases where several committees are conducting inquiry in aid of legislation involving certain issues, assuming that the primary committee prepares the report, is the majority requirement for purposes of filing and consideration by the Senate on a per committee basis or all the members of the different committees lumped together. To illustrate, Mr. President, for the Blue Ribbon Committee, consisting of 20 members with one vacancy left by Senator, our former colleague, Senator Cayetano, it appears that 7 members signed and concurred in the report. Senators Gordon, Ejercito, Hunasan, Pacquiao, Subiri, Soto, and Villar. 2 signed with reservations. 4 signed with concurring and dissenting votes. And 1 dissenting vote, as I said, joined by his colleagues in the minority. With respect to the Committee on Health and Demography, Mr. President, with 14 members, it appears that 5 members signed and concurred in the report. 4 signed with concurring and dissenting votes, 2 dissenting votes, and 3 did not sign the report. In the Finance Committee, with 20 members, it appears that 7 members signed and concurred in the report. 2 signed with reservations, 4 signed with concurring and dissenting votes, etc., etc. Now, may I point out, Mr. President, Section 22 of Resolution Number 5, otherwise known as the Rules of Procedure Governing Inquiries in Aid of Legislation, adopted by the Senate on August 9, 2010, and which was published on August 19, 2016. I would just read the portion that is relevant to the issue at hand, Mr. President. It says here, the report shall be, Section 22, Report of Committee. The report shall be approved by a majority vote of all its members. Concurring and dissenting reports may likewise be made by the members who do not sign the majority report within 72 hours from the approval of the report. The number of members who sign reports concurring in the conclusions of the committee report shall be taken into account in determining whether the report has been approved by the majority of the members, provided, and I'd like to highlight or underscore this portion, Mr. President, that the vote of a member who submits both a concurring and dissenting opinion shall not be considered as part of the majority unless he expressly indicates his vote for the majority decision. Mr. President, in view of this said provision, may this representation be informed whether the required majority was obtained for us to consider Committee Report Number 368. This doesn't need an immediate response from the Majority Leader, Mr. President. Therefore, I move that Committee Report Number 368 be referred in the meantime to the Committee on Rules for discussion and resolution, Mr. President. I so move, Mr. President.
For the purpose of addressing the questions
Yes,
raised
Mr.
by
President.
Senator Lacson. Majority Leader, what is our response?
Mr. President, there were a number of issues that Senator Lacson raised, and there were a number of questions that even if he wanted the questions now, I would not be able to answer all of it. So I will not object to the motion of referring it to the Committee on Rules.
Because some of the questions are factual questions. So, okay, so is there any objection? Okay, hearing none, the Committee Report Number 368 is referred to the Committee on Rules.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. President, may I move that the referral of House Bill 7007 be transferred from the Committee on Rules to the Committee on Education, Arts, and Culture. House Bill 7007 is a measure entitled An Act Converting the Davao Oriental State College of Science and Technology in the city of Mati and all its satellite campuses located in the province of Davao Oriental into a state university to be known as the Davao Oriental State University and appropriating funds therefore. So, Mr. President, the proper referral at this point now is to the Committee on Education. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection to the motion? Hearing none, it is so referred.
May we now recognize the Chairman of the Committee on Education, Mr. President.
Senator Escudero.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, distinguished Majority Floor Leader. Mr. President, your Committee on Education has already considered a counterpart bill in the Senate, namely Senate Bill Number 1617. With the transfer of House Bill Number 7007 to the Committee on Education, Arts and Culture, I move, Mr. President, that we adopt House Bill number 7007, entitled An Act Converting the Davao Oriental State College of Science and Technology in the city of Mati and all its satellite campuses located in the province of Davao Oriental into a state university to be known as the Davao Oriental State University, and appropriating funds therefore as an amendment to Senate Bill number 1617, sans a bicameral conference committee meeting. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection to the motion of Senator Escudero as chair of our Committee on Education? Okay, hearing none, the motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, there are additional reference of business and second additional reference of business, but we can take it up later because of the urgency of the measures that we have to discuss. So, with the permission of the body, I move to resume consideration of Senate Bill 1717 under Committee Report 255.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, this is the measure on the basic law for the bangsamoro. The parliamentary status of the measure is we're still in the period of interpellations. And may I move to recognize the sponsor, Senator Mig Subiri.
Senator Subiri is recognized.
There are a number of members who have listed to interpellate: Villanueva, Pacquiao, Pimentel, Pangilinan, and Recto next week. But today, Mr. President, to start off with interpellations, the minority leader. I move to recognize the minority leader, Senator Franklin Drilon.
The minority leader is recognized for interpellation.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, in our practice and tradition in this Congress and the Senate, usually the minority leader is the last to interpellate. But as a matter of cooperation with the majority group and to show that we have no intention to delay the consideration of this measure, we have agreed on the request of the Senate President and the Majority Leader that we now proceed with our, to avail of the period of interpellation. First of all, before we proceed, we would like to spread into the record our commendation to the good sponsor, Senator Mig Subiri, for the effort that he has put in trying to put together this committee report. This is not an easy piece of legislation. It's very complicated. And as we all know, previous versions of these measures, starting with the Memorandum of Agreement on Ancestral Domain, was declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. The matter of the Comprehensive Agreement on the Bangsamoro never saw the light of day because of the many questions raised on the committee report in the last Congress. And therefore, we stand and avail of this period of interpretation to raise questions so that we can clarify many of the provisions, suggest amendments in the hope of cleansing the bill with unconstitutional provisions to our reading, subject, of course, to the better judgment of the Chamber, so that when this issue is brought to the Supreme Court, and I'm certain it will be brought to the Supreme Court, at least it will not suffer the same fate as the MOA AD. It is in that sense that we will raise questions, we will propose and we will express opinions and submit the same to the Chamber for final decisions, all in the desire to make this bill as acceptable to everyone as possible, because we are one with the sponsor that what we need is peace and stability in that part of our country. So it is in that sense that I am asking the sponsor to yield the floor to this representation. It is my understanding that after today, in the next session, Senator Ralph Recto will resume or will start his own interpellation, and we follow the listing as found in our in the notices sent to us on the order of interpellation. So in order to save time, may I now ask the gentleman sponsor if he's willing to yield to his time for this representation to ask questions. I have quite a number of questions.
Yes, Mr. President.
Mr. President. So
Mr. President,
we can start.
I'd like to first of all, of course, it'll be an honor for me to be interpellated by one of the legal luminaries of this distinguished chamber and former Senate President. I'd like to also thank the former Senate President, our Minority Floor Leader, for the bipartisan support that they have given us. Senator Risa, Senator Bam, and even the former Senate President, Frank Dulon, our Minority Floor Leader, Mr. President, was spearheading this in the last Congress. In the 16th Congress, he spearheaded truly the moves for peace with the passing of the Bangsamoro law. Unfortunately, many incidences had happened and many stumbling blocks had been put along the way. And so we thank the bipartisan support of the minority, Mr. President, in pushing for this needed amendments, this needed legislation, Mr. President. And I studied very hard over the break precisely to be able to answer, hopefully, the queries of our good Minority Floor Leader and our good Senate President Pro Temp by next week. These two are probably the most learned of our institution, and I will closely listen to their questions and try to answer to the best of my abilities, Mr. President.
Mr. President, there are, I think, 4 other colleagues of ours who have also listed themselves to ask questions. Are we saying that you can get...
Kasama po sila.
Kasama sila. Baka naman
Mas
nakalimutan
learned
mo.
po kayo
Hindi,
in terms of experience.
Kabilang ni Ralph kasi binanggit ninyo, yung ibang kasamahan natin, hindi nyo binabanggit na pinaghandaan nyo,
Magagaling din po sila.
sige, mabuti naman.
Thank you, Mr. President.
First, some preliminary questions. Mr. President, is it our understanding that this Bangsamoro Basic Law that we are now debating on, once it becomes law, will repeal Republic Act 9054 and Republic Act 6734?
That is correct, Your Honor, Mr. President.
Yes, it will repeal. In fact, that is in the title of the measure and in the repealing clause, Article 17, Section 2, which expressly states Republic Act 6734 as amended by Republic Act 9054 is hereby repealed in their entirety.
That is correct, Mr. President.
There is an express repeal of these 2 laws.
That is correct, Mr. President.
The reason I'm raising that is in Article 17, Section 6, and in Article 12, Section 6 and 17. It would appear that the powers, duties, and rights vested by law and exercised by the ARMM is transferred to the Bangsamoro government. If we are repealing Republic Act 6734 and Republic Act 9054, what are being transferred? What powers, what duties, what rights are vested by law, meaning these 2 laws that are being transferred if we are repealing them? Just for clarification, especially that Section 6 and 17 of Article 12 are on taxation powers. And in fairness, we must know what these powers that are being transferred so that we can ask questions whether in fact these are valid powers. Number two, the public is entitled to know what are these powers that are being transferred. And more importantly, a very clear rule in statutory construction is that if you repeal, you cannot cite it. If you repeal a statute, you cannot cite it as the source of powers. Here, there is an express repeal. But at the same time, it says all powers, duties, and rights vested by law and exercised by the ARMM are hereby transferred to the bangsamoro government. These are under Article 17, Section 6, and Article 12, Section 6, and Section 17 on the taxing powers. This is a very difficult provision, Mr. President. This will lead to confusion. We will never know what powers are transferred.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, while questioning the BTC on your query, what they wanted to do was to actually build on the gains of the autonomous region of Muslim Mindanao, not to completely forget all the gains and programs and projects that they put forward during their tenure the last 30 years, if I'm not mistaken, of the autonomous region of Muslim Mindanao, or over 20 years. But it probably is a problem subject to style, and I agree with you on the fact that once you repeal, you cannot restate basically all powers and duties. So in the proper time, if you would like to propose, Mr. President, an amendment to that effect to clarify this particular provision, we would be amenable, Mr. President.
The gentleman sponsor agrees that we cannot cite all powers, duties, and rights as being transferred to the bangsamoro government if, in fact, Republic Act 1954 and Republic Act 6734 are expressly repealed.
I agree, Mr. President.
If you agree, then at the appropriate time, we will delete provisions of similar import found in various provisions of the proposed measure.
Yes, Mr. President.
Is that correct, sir?
Yes, Mr. President. The idea is sound. The idea is accepted, Mr. President. I believe the only thing that they would like to explicitly say, Mr. President, with the permission of the Minority Floor Leader, we put a section here wherein the laws passed by the RLA, the Regional Legislative Assembly, because they passed a lot of codes and laws already on the local level. We would like to retain, the new bangsamoro government would like to retain the approval of these measures unless hereby amended further with the new bangsamoro parliament.
Mr. President, those ordinances remain as ordinances
Correct, sir.
unless they are now in contravention with the new law that we will pass.
Yes.
Because this new law, the BBL, if enacted, will be superior to the ordinances enacted by the previous, by the ARMM government. But those which are not inconsistent, they remain as local ordinances, continues to be effective until repealed by that body. So that's a principle that is accepted on the issue of local governance and local ordinances.
Yes, Mr. President.
But I think what we're trying to achieve is that we are making sure that the BBL, in its final form, will not be less powerful than the existing arm. I think that's the.
Well, Mr. President,
that is what we're trying to achieve.
That is a matter of debate. But just to clarify, if that is what is desired, then let's enumerate all the powers. Because we are saying that the two laws are repealed now, and then we're saying that we want to make it more powerful. Fine, as long as we enumerate in the law, what are these powers, so that we will know what powers granted are.
Your point, Minority Leader, is that we just cannot refer to the laws and then in the law that we are passing, we are explicitly repealing the laws that we are referring to.
That's correct.
That's correct.
That's correct.
I see your point.
It's-
But if we restate the powers in the laws that we are repealing, then there should
There's
be no
nothing
problem.
wrong with that,
Yes, yes.
if you restate it. But in this particular case, there is no restatement. And admitted in the interpretation is that they said that we are going to build on these gains. That's a very vague provision, Mr. President. And it can suffer a constitutional, constitutional question, it can be questioned because the basic principle is that the title must reflect the must be reflective of the bill, of the law. And if the title says we repeal, and then the body says, no, we're not repealing, we're retaining these powers, something, it can be questioned. So I strongly suggest, as agreed upon, that we will delete any provision which in substance will retain the powers, duties, and rights vested by law and exercised by the ARMM, unless we restate them in clear terms. Is that agreed upon, Mr. President, so that we can prepare in the period with the
Yes, Mr.
amendment?
President, I agree with the minority floor leader. Again, unless it is, if it is not expressly written down and stated, we are willing to put the expressed
Okay. Thank you, Mr.
powers
President.
and functions.
Let us go now to Article 1, Section 1, Section 2, Section 3. The
Article, I'm sorry, Mr. President, what was the section again, and article?
Article 1, Section
Okay.
1, 2, and 3. All right. Just spread on the record. Why are we calling the proposed measure bangsamoro basic law? The constitutional commissioners during the deliberations of the 1987 Constitution referred to it as the autonomous region of Muslim Mindanao. Just for the record, can the gentleman explain why we are calling it bangsamoro?
Under the several agreements signed with the government, including the most recent one in 2014 on the comprehensive agreement on the bangsamoro, that was the name that was agreed upon by the different groups seeking peace with government, Mr. President. And that is the name that they want to be identified with in the new setup of government in the region.
Mr. President, what is the etymology of bangsa? Because to our study, this is not a Filipino term.
Yeah, can I have a 1-minute suspension, Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. President.
Suspended.
I'm ready, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, on the issue on bangsa, where it was derived from, it's actually a Malay term which means nation or country, Mr. President. And bangsamoro put together is basically, what it basically means is Moro land or Moro nation, Mr. President.
So why are we using bangsa, which is not a Filipino term, but a Malay?
We have adopted it, Mr. President.
Who has
We also-
adopted it, Mr. President? When we say we, who has adopted it?
The people, Mr. President, in the area of ARM, Autonomous Region of Muslim Mindanao, have used bangsa, the word bangsamoro, for quite a long period of time, as being told to me by our colleagues from the BTC, Mr. President. And
May the good gentleman honor us with some documentary evidence that in fact Bangsamoro has been accepted by our people in southern Philippines, because I have also talked to a number of Muslims of Filipinos who are in that part of the country, and they prefer retaining the word Muslim as in order that there can be an identity that can command more respect vis-a-vis the Christian majority.
Mr. President, bangsamoro, the word bangsamoro has been utilized in Republic Act 1954, which is the creation of the armed law. Many references there to bangsamoro, as well as the CAB, which is the final agreement signed by the MILF and the government peace panel, agreed to utilizing the word bangsamoro, Mr. President.
All right.
And most Moro fronts, including MNLF, have recognized the word of bangsamoro, Your Honor.
Okay, we will not debate on that anymore. But just for the record, we want to spread on the record that bangsa etymology is from Sanskrit.
That's correct, Mr. President.
This is the primary liturgical language of Hinduism. And we are putting this into our system. I will not debate on this issue, but just to put on record that indeed we are adopting a word which is not even Filipino. Moro, as we know, is also historically in reference to the Moors in Spain. So we are having words which are not really Filipino, but as I said, I will not really insist on this, just so we can have this on the record.
Just to answer quickly also, Mr.
Yes,
President, the root word of bangsa is actually bansa. So, or the other way around, rather,
Bangsa,
the root word of bansa is bangsa. So, yung bansa na Tagalog word is actually a Filipino word for nation. So,
Yes.
they utilize the bangsa moro.
Yeah.
But I guess it's in the name, it's
Well,
branding, I guess.
but if you look at the dictionaries, bangsa, if you look at the etymology, is from Sanskrit.
Yes,
It's
that's right.
Hindu, not Filipino. Anyway, now, so the question is, who are the Bangsamoro people? And are they the same or different from the Muslims?
Section 3. These are the indigenous peoples of the Bangsamoro, the settlers, and under Section 1, Article 2, and to quote, the Bangsamoro people are, at the advent of the Spaniards, were considered natives or original inhabitants of Mindanao and Sulu archipelago and its adjacent islands, including Palawan. Their descendants, whether mixed or full blood, shall have the right to identify themselves as Bangsamoro by ascription or self-ascription. Spouses and their descendants are classified as Bangsamoro.
So, so what is the answer? Are they the same, are the Bangsamoro people the same or different from the Muslims?
Yeah, yes, Mr. President, these are the original inhabitants, because when you say Bangsamoro, for
So-
example, Cotabato City, Mr. President, Bangsamoro in Cotabato City would mean all the inhabitants of Cotabato City, which could have Christians, IPs.
Okay, so including Christians and other sects
Yes.
of the territory?
Yes,
All right.
but they have a freedom of choice, Mr. President. Under Section 2, under the freedom of choice, no discrimination basis of identity and religion. They can choose to be Bangsamoro or not, Mr. President.
But we thought Bangsamoro is a description of the
Hindi
race.
discuss natin
It's
yung
not
study.
by choice. If you are, by definition, if you are, you're a native or original inhabitant in Mindanao and Sulu Archipelago and adjacent island, including Palawan and their descendants, shall have the right to identify themselves as Bangsamoro by ascription or self-ascription. In other words, it is not their choice, but because they're there, they should be considered as Bangsamoro. That's how I understand the provision to be, Mr. President.
But it's more, it's a mix between race, religion, and history, or historical attribute, Mr. President. For example, yesterday we had, no, let me correct by saying, when you say Bangsamoro, because people identify Bangsamoro as being Muslim. What I'd like to say and put on record is that Bangsamoro is an aggregation of people on a particular area, geographic area. In this particular case, the 5 provinces of the Autonomous Region of Muslim Mindanao, and possibly an expanded area after the plebiscite. But if we placed in Section 2 the freedom of choice, wherein the other indigenous peoples, including Christians, would be respected. The reason why I brought that up on the freedom of choice is, yesterday we had a discussion in Sofitel. I invited the DBM, the DOF, several NGOs, including the BTC, and we had a discussion. And the question cropped up is, what if the BBL is set in place and now everybody must be known, residents of this area must be known as Bangsamoro people, which may have a connotation on religion. Ang sabi ng isang BTC commissioner, Mr. President, particularly a Christian BTC commissioner, Commissioner Anayatin, she said, under Section 2, we have the freedom of choice to be identified as a Bangsamoro or a Christian settler of the Bangsamoro area. So,
Can we have that?
clarification.
You have a choice of either a Bangsamoro or a Christian settler
Or an IP settler in the Bangsamoro area.
or a Christian settler in the Bangsamoro.
Yes, sir. But they're all Filipinos. In other words, we're all Filipinos.
So what is the choice?
For example, Mr. President,
No, what is
Yeah.
the choice? Freedom of choice. When a Christian gets out of the territory of the Bangsamoro, he is no longer a Bangsamoro? Or on the contrary,
No, sir.
if he is in the territory of the Bangsamoro, he is a Christian, he is a Bangsamoro. In other words, there can be flexibility because of the freedom of choice. Can we explain this for the record?
yes. Actually, your choice on the matter is really by either self-ascription or ascription to have been recognized under, this is recognized under international and domestic law, defining indigenous peoples and the Moro peoples, indigenous peoples, Mr. President. So, going back to the question, if you want to be identified as a Bangsamoro, then well and good. Under Section 1, you are identified as such. But if you are, for example, Cardinal Quevedo, Mr. President, may not want to be identified as a bangsamoro, but he resides in the bangsamoro area, that should also be respected under this charter, Mr. President.
So one day, you can be a bangsamoro. The next day, you may not no longer be a bangsamoro. Is that how we understand it, sir?
Hindi naman po, sir.
Well, because we have freedom of choice. You know, that's, in other words, that's what precisely even the Supreme Court, in the case of North Cotabato, the MOA AD case, raised the issue. What does freedom of choice mean? That's why we're asking the same question. Because this was left hanging by the Supreme Court in the case of North Cotabato, involving MOA AD. A similar phrase was found, freedom of choice. And that is why the Supreme Court raised that question in the decision. And here we're trying to get a clear answer what exactly freedom of choice is. Do they have the choice of one day being a bangsamoro, the next day no longer a bangsamoro?
It identified there are other indigenous peoples there who would want to retain their
Identity, yes.
aside from
That's correct. There are other indigenous peoples there, Mr. President, like
Tedorais.
the tribe Tedorais, that do not want to be identified as Bangsamoro, but are residents of the Bangsamoro area. So that is why this provision was put in place, Mr. President.
So if they do not want to be identified as Bangsamoro, is the Bangsamoro Basic Law applicable to them?
Yes, Mr. President. It
But
is a
they are
matter of
not Bangsamoro.
identity lamang po, but it's the territory remains. So therefore, the charter of the Bangsamoro Basic Law will be under that jurisdiction.
So they are Bangsamoro because they are in Bangsamoro territory?
But they don't want to lose their identity. This actually was crafted for our indigenous peoples. We have also a commissioner yesterday that was member of the commission, that's an IP, and he said very strongly that, and one of the reasons why MOAD AD and other, the original proposals for the BBL were shut down because of the lack of consultation with the IPs. This time, under the new BTC setup, they had commissioners that were Christian and IPs, and the request of our indigenous peoples there was that to lump them as Bangsamoro people because, according to them, religiously they are different and culturally they're different, but they reside in the Bangsamoro area. Ang request lang nila is hindi po sila malamsam as Bangsamoro para hindi mawala yung kanilang cultural identity, which I think is a fair request.
No, yes, it's a fair request, but it causes questions in our mind, it causes confusion. Para bagang, maybe it's not really a right example, but when you are in the Philippines, you are a Filipino. But you have a freedom of choice. Once you get out of the territory of the Philippines, you are no longer a Filipino. I don't think that's proper. I don't know if
I think
that's
it's
a
not
correct
really
interpretation. But the way the answer is given, it could be interpreted in that manner. Because there are Bautis, there are Lumads, there are indigenous peoples in the territory. So, are they Bangsamoro people? I think we should answer that question directly because this is, we are crafting a bill, it's called Bangsamoro Basic Law. So who is Bangsamoro? Who are the Bangsamoro people? There is a provision on Bangsamoro people.
Yes, Mr. President, no, the Bangsamoro, which is Bangsamoro is, once the Bangsamoro is established, the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region, it's composed of its people, identity, government, and territory. But the need to identify cannot be imposed. The need to be identified as Bangsamoro cannot be imposed on the others, on the people. But Bangsamoro composes of, as I mentioned, identity, government, territory, people, governance. So Bangsamoro as a name, as a whole, in totality, includes the government, the identity, the culture, the people, but we cannot impose this. In other words, under Section 2, we put a provision that Cardinal Quevedo not necessarily is a Bangsamoro because he's the head of our Catholic faith in the region. That is the whole purpose of this freedom of choice. I think maybe my example may be wrong, maybe my understanding of it may be wrong, but the idea really is to put that particular freedom of choice wherein they'll be allowed to live in the territory but not necessarily be identified as a Bangsamoro. I want to use another example. For example, if I lived in Iloilo, which is what we call the Ilonggo Nation, the area of Region 6, and I'm a Ilocano, I live there, I follow the rules and regulations of the city, but I'm not an Ilonggo. I'm an Ilocano.
because
but I'm
all
a
of us are
Filipino.
Filipinos.
But we're all Filipinos. Correct, Your Honor. We're all Filipinos.
And we have no Ilonggo basic law.
No, sir. But we have local ordinances
But
that
this-
we must follow.
But this section does not talk about citizenship. It just-
No, sir.
Yeah, it's
Not whatsoever.
It's,
sorry?
it's identification.
Sorry, sir?
No, this section does not talk about citizenship. So this is
No,
about
it does not.
identification as Bangsamoro. So as I understand it, Mr. Sponsor, please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
In Bangsamoro, which I will use to mean Moro land, in Bangsamoro, there can be Bangsamoro people and non-Bangsamoro people.
Yes.
That's how I understand your
Yes, Mr.
explanation to be.
So, all right. So what are it says the Bangsamoro people have freedom of choice. What is the consequence of exercising such freedom of choice?
It does not
And what are the choices available to an individual
It does not.
within the Bangsamoro territory? And what are the consequences of making those, exercising that freedom of choice?
Mr. President, this particular section and article does not confer any rights or privileges like any citizenship. It's just conferring identity. It only discusses identity, Mr. President. So, on people who struggled historically through the years against the Spaniards, the Americans, and to a certain extent even government, Mr. President. So it's just an identity. It has nothing to do with citizenship.
Okay. Now, the description of the Bangsamoro people includes natives or original inhabitants of Mindanao and the Sulu Archipelago and its adjacent islands, including Palawan. Now, there are many people from my province who are concerned about this phrase, including Palawan, because they have also resided in Palawan. What does this exactly mean? That there are there Bangsamoro people in Palawan, but Palawan is not part of the Bangsamoro territory?
That is correct, Mr.
Is
President.
that a correct understanding?
That's a correct
Because that will
understanding.
give comfort to my kababayans.
Yes, Mr. President.
Huh?
It's just a historical fact that the Sulu Sultanate included at one point in time Palawan. And but it's in no way is Palawan part of any territory proposed even in the Bangsamoro
All right.
law.
Thank you, Mr. President. But having said that, what does the Bangsamoro government lose by removing Palawan from the description, considering the answer now of the gentleman? Kung wala naman pong, hindi naman po kasama sila doon, eh bakit hindi na lang po natin alisin ang Palawan so that there are no agam-agam in the minds of the people of Palawan? Because otherwise, Mr. President,
Yes.
there are Muslims in Taguig. We should also including people in Taguig. Although Taguig is not part of the Bangsamoro territory, there are Bangsamoro people there, but it is not mentioned. With the answer of the gentleman, maybe there is enough reason just to delete Palawan, hindi naman talaga po kasama sila.
Mr. President, probably in the proper time, we could discuss further in the period of amendments this issue. But I understand and I feel from where the group is coming from. It's historical. They just want to present it as a historical fact that at one point in time, these areas were identified as the Bangsamoro. Although, if you look further into the measure, there is no mention of Palawan as part of the territory or even in the plan of expansion or assimilation, Mr. President. So, but the sponsors, I mean, the minority leader is correct in pointing that out. Although the BTC would like to keep it as a historical reminder that once upon a time, Palawan, through the historical perspective, was part of the Sultanate of Sulu.
Mr. President, when we craft laws, we define rights, we define duties. I do not recall that we craft a law to record history.
That's also in the Constitution, in the history.
Because the inclusion of Palawan can give rise to rights and obligations. And if the sponsors' answer is that they're not really part of it, so if they're not really part of it, why can we not delete it? We are not losing anything. The territory is not in any way diminished. The identity of the Bangsamoro continues to be as is. Just the inclusion of Palawan is admitted only to record a historical fact. Whether or not we record a historical fact, it remains a historical fact. It is not the law that makes it, that validates the history. It is history itself which validates that fact. So if the gentleman sponsor can agree that in the period of amendment, we can delete the reference to Palawan, we would have one less area of concern on this Bangsamoro basic law.
Yes, Mr. President, but just would like to put on record that even the preamble of the Constitution has the history of the Philippines in it, including silent references to even Sabah, Mr. President, the archipelago.
No.
But that being that being said, rather, not being a non-lawyer, at the proper time, Mr. President, we can discuss and consider a proposed amendment to remove Palawan.
Thank you,
If that
Mr.
will appease the constituents
But,
of...
gentlemen, we will have a problem because the same section mentions Mindanao. And not the entire Mindanao is also part of the territory of Bangsamoro. So similar argument can be made to also not mention the portions of Mindanao not
That's
part
what I'm
of the
afraid of,
territory.
Mr.
So that
President.
is that's a big problem. But as far as I can understand, Section 1 of Article 2, it needs to be consistent with the historical point of view of the Sulu Sultanate, that this was once upon part of the Sulu Sultanate, because
Yes,
they
Mr.
want to
President.
give the descendants the right to choose to identify themselves as Bangsamoro. So, for example, a present resident of Palawan who claims to be a descendant of an original inhabitant of Palawan at the advent of the Spaniards can now identify himself or herself as Bangsamoro on the basis of Section 1 as written,
Yes, sir.
so that this will now have value when this person transfers residence into Bangsamoro territory.
Yes, sir, Mr. President.
In the sense that he's now part of Bangsamoro. When he runs for public office there,
Yes,
he cannot occupy the seat for the non-Moro. Is that all, is that
Yes, Mr.
is that
President.
the application also of Section 1?
Yes, Mr. President. We're envisioning, Mr. President, that one day, it's like parang ang gusto po namin mangyari na mga kapatid natin Muslim in Taguig, Baguio, and all these areas will see the development in the Bangsamoro region and hopefully one day come back. Balik Bangsamoro sila. And then they will be able to contribute to the development of the area. And you're correct. You're absolutely correct, Mr. President, that this is historical. It's just we're mentioning historical fact, Mr. President.
But there's also a practical application
Yes.
in the sense that someone who identifies himself or herself as Bangsamoro
Yes, Mr. President.
cannot possibly be nominated for the sectoral seat for the non-Moro.
Yes, Mr.
Tama po
President.
ba yun? Is
Yes,
that,
Mr.
is that
President.
an application?
That's correct.
I'm sorry, Mr. President.
In the parliament,
When I was
because
reading this, I was already confused. After all the answers of the gentleman sponsor, I am more confused.
On which part, Mr. President?
Well, what part?
Well,
seems
anyway,
that the
I
President
wanted to
and
go to the
myself
next
are not
topic, but
confused.
if we want to debate on territory,
No,
then
Mr.
it
President,
will be
I already
better
agreed.
that
I already agreed, Mr.
We run
President.
out of quorum, Mr. President.
Okay.
Yeah, and Mr. President, I already agreed that in proper time,
Yes, okay.
if there's a proposed amendment, we will consider it, Mr. President.
Non-Moro.
So can we proceed to the next topic?
Yes, Mr. President.
Go ahead, sir.
I am just on page 4 of my notes. Mr. President, the preamble states, quote, affirming our distinct historical identity and birthright to our ancestral homeland and our right to self-determination, to chart our political future through a democratic process that will secure our identity and prosperity and allow for genuine and meaningful self-governance as stipulated in the Comprehensive Agreement on Bangsamoro. End of quote. Question: is the Comprehensive Agreement on Bangsamoro part of the law by adhesion?
The references to President of the CAB or the CAB in the BBL does not make it an integral part of the BBL. However, since the CAB is a peace agreement signed by government, Mr. President, the CAB may serve as a guide in clarifying some of the provisions of the BBL so as to honor the real intention of the parties. Yesterday, we had a discussion, Mr. President, that the CAB is a larger document than the BBL. The BBL is only part of the comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro. There are several phases and steps to achieve the final phase of the comprehensive agreement of the Bangsamoro. This is in the last phase. This is the third phase, Mr. President, which is a unilateral move of government to create the political setup, to give the political solution, and after which demilitarization and decommissioning and normalization will happen, Mr. President. So the mention of the CAB here under the preamble is really because the CAB is the mother agreement signed in 2014 by government and the largest Moro Liberation Front, Islamic Liberation Front, the largest rebel movement of the South, Mr. President.
Well, you know, Mr. President, general statements like the CAB is the mother agreement, when you get to the nitty-gritty of a debate as to whether the CAB is part of the BBL, will create a lot of confusion and concern. So I just, because we want to point out, Mr. President, that there are, to our count, about 9 documents that are consolidated in the comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro. And so the question is, are these agreements part of the BBL or not?
What he's trying to say is, what he's trying to ask is, under the mention. Well, according to the lawyers of the BTC, Mr. President, the preamble does not confer any right.
So,
It's also a reference. It's like the reference,
all right.
like a vision.
Just so we can leave this topic with a comfortable understanding, even if it's just in the preamble, can we say that provided, however, or what should expect, provided, however, that nothing in this law shall be interpreted as incorporating the powers, rights, relations under the comprehensive agreement on the bangsamoro, because there are a lot of issues there. Just as an example, you have 4 annexes in the bangsamoro on the CAB, including transitional arrangements, power sharing, revenue generation, wealth sharing. You have an addendum on bangsamoro waters, etc., etc. So these are substantive rights being created. To make a reference to this can create an argument that the CAB is part of the BBL. If the intention is not so, let us make it clear and so state in the preamble when we come to the period of amendments, if that is agreed. Otherwise, I will ask questions on every document attached to the CAB.
No, Mr. President, that's not necessary. We accept, Mr. President.
All right. Thank you very much. Now, by the way, Mr. President, is this, what is the view of the MNLF on the BBL? Are they endorsing this?
Yes, Mr. President. We have members of the BTC here now that are members of the MNLF, Mr. President.
Has Professor Miswari endorsed this document, Mr. President?
Well, the President has met him twice and assured him that during the appointment of the BTA, which is the Bangsamoro Transition Authority, that the MNLF will be properly represented as well. He's just being silent about it, Mr. President. Let me just get these notes from the MNLF representative himself. Ang gusto kasi ni Brother Noor is not only to implement the CAB but also the signed agreements of the 1996 and 1976 Tripoli agreements. So medyo malawak po yung sa kanya. Although most of those were already addressed noon, Republic Act 1954, and now enhanced by the BBL. It is now enhanced by the BBL. So the peace panel, through the Office of the Peace Process, have been constantly in touch with Chairman Noor Miswari. Unfortunately, Mr. President, to be very honest, napupolitika po yung BBL, and I'd like to put this on record. Napupolitika po ito dahil obviously ang mabibigyan ng kapangyarihan ay ang MILF and to a certain extent MNLF, and we know the MNLF are in the island provinces. Most of them are in the island provinces of the arm. There are politicians, Mr. President, who are undermining this process. I'd rather not name names, Mr. President. I'll let the good gentleman know when we are in the lounge or we're in break. But I don't want to create any more an atmosphere of anger and resentment. But there are politicians that are resenting the change because obviously there are reforms to be put in place, new method of governance, and change. People are always fearful of change, Mr. President. So minsan sinusulsul yung binibigyan po ng fake news ang iba't ibang organisasyon at dyan po nagkakaproblema. But if you look at the BBL in its entirety, I personally feel, Mr. President, that measure is an instrument of peace. And I've said this, it's an instrument of peace. And later on, we'll be discussing with Senator Senator Drilon and Senator Recto, probably the fiscal management side. And we will show, and I will present to you, DBM figures on how the ARM historically has not received its fair share of development funds. As a matter of fact, it's a pittance compared to regions around Mindanao. It's a pittance. I'm talking about 1/4 of the budgets of Caraga, Region 10, Region 11, Region 9, and Region 12. A pittance. And yet, all the strife, all the fighting, all the conflict is in this small area. It's a chicken or the egg scenario. No development is being given and no development is being brought on. And yet, this small particular geography of the Philippines is creating so much trouble for national government and for its people. And so, Mr. President, the MNLF, I believe, once this is passed, amended by the senators into an improved, efficient version of the BBL, those who oppose this will see the light. And I believe this will be able to stem violent extremism in our side of Mindanao.
We join the gentleman in his noble desire to have really an agreement acceptable to all. That is why, to start with, we wanted to know if in its present form it has the approval and endorsement of the MNLF. From the answer of the gentleman, it is our hope that at the end of the day, when we are able to craft a BBL after a rigorous debate on the chamber, that the other elements or the other politicians who are undermining the BBL will see the light. But by the way, who are these politicians undermining the Bangsamoro Basic Law, Mr. President?
I'll tell you in secrecy, Mr. President, if it's all right with the good gentleman from Iloilo.
Maraming secret dito.
Mga kaibigan din po natin sila. Fortunately.
All right, but levity aside, it is a serious concern that we are all desirous of united, unified Bangsamoro government and territory, and but apparently this does not. This is not accept this version or this law in its present form. Is no guarantee of the unity and peace in that area because of certain elements. But we leave it at that, as it does not involve...
But for the record, Mr. President, really quickly, to answer that, during our hearings, and Senator Risa Ontiveros was there, Mr. President, and even the Senate President was attending these hearings, we had the overwhelming support of the leaders of Maguindanao, of Llano del Sur, of Tawi-Tawi, and Basilan. Sa Sulu lang po, nagkakaproblema po kami. And that's the seat of the MNLF. That's why we're still convincing our brothers in the MNLF that this is the best solution for the problems of the autonomous region, Mr. President. But we have, the members that are here from the MNLF are fully supportive. The Central Committee, right here, he's telling me now, the Central Committee of the MNLF supports the BBL.
Thank you, Mr. President. We'll leave it at that and hope that indeed, after this law passes through the Senate, it can indeed create an environment where the unity of the people in southern Philippines, in those 5 provinces, can indeed be achieved so that the resulting peace can be conducive to faster development of that area. Now, Mr. President, to continue, is the good gentleman familiar with the elements of the statehood as quoted in the case of North Cotabato versus Government of the Republic of the Philippines?
Can I ask for a half-minute suspension, Mr. President?
Session suspended.
is the difference? Under the new Bangsamoro Basic Law, people, territory, government. Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, under the Bangsamoro Basic Law, what is discussed and put on the table are people, territory, and government, but no sovereignty. That
No,
was the
Mr.
difference
President, the
between
question is,
Yes.
is the gentleman aware of the elements of the statehood as defined by the Supreme Court in the case of North Cotabato
What is the
versus
element of
Government
statehood?
of the Republic of the Philippines? This was decided on October 14, 2008.
That's correct, Mr. President. We know it fully well because one of the lawyers of the case is here with us. Actually, he was in the losing side. And according to our distinguished lawyers, it covers 4 aspects, which is people, territory, government, and sovereignty. And that
No.
was questioned by, I believe, North Cotabato, North Cotabato won the case in the Supreme Court. I believe together with Senator Drilon and Senator Maros as additional petitioners on the MOAD AD. So, according to our legal luminaries here with us, under the Bangsamoro Basic Law, we remove the issue of sovereignty. Any discussion of sovereignty is removed. And it's limited to territory, people, and government.
Mr. President, in the case of North Cotabato, the Supreme Court cited the Montevideo Convention, a convention signed in 1933, which defined the elements of the statehood. And for the record, let me state them and repeat them here. The 4 elements are, number 1, a permanent population. Number 2, a defined territory. Number 3, a government. And number 4, the capacity to enter into relations with other states. These are the 4 elements that the Supreme Court defined as elements of a statehood under international law, particularly the Montevideo Convention. In examining these provisions of the present BBL, Mr. President, we respectfully submit that we must always be guided by these elements. To ignore these elements of a statehood would plant and establish the seeds of secession. Mr. President, the Catalonia experience in Spain is too recent and too fresh in our memory to forget and ignore. We have to make sure that we do not fall into that kind of situation. I think it is our responsibility as present leaders of this country to make sure that these elements are not propagated, which could result in secession. So first, a permanent population. Would the Bangsamoro people described meet the criteria of a permanent population as an element of statehood?
Well, not as an element of statehood. Mr. President, in granting autonomy, which we have done in the Autonomous Region of Muslim Mindanao, Republic Act 1954 has already granted territory, which has been defined through elections and plebiscites. And in this territory, there is a permanent population, residents, that cast their vote, that have the rights and privileges of the citizens of the Republic. And the addition to having a government, a sub-government, a sub-national government, which is allowed under our Constitution in granting autonomy to not only the BBL or the Bangsamoro, but also to the Cordilleras. But we have put safeguards, several safeguards, for example, under our preamble, and let me quote, within the framework of the Constitution, the national sovereignty and territorial integrity of the Republic of the Philippines, in consonance with accepted principles of human rights, liberty, justice, democracy, and norms of standards of international law. And we make several mentions of national government and the Republic of the Philippines within the Bangsamoro Basic Law. Relations with other states, we do not have, Mr. President. Any embassy, we will not have any envoy. We will not entertain, under the law, there will be no office of such. Like a Ministry of Foreign Affairs, there shall be none. Foreign relations will remain with central government, explicitly stated under the BBL. So, yung isang aspeto doon po, Mr. President, ay wala, which is the sovereignty and relations with other states.
No, Mr. President, let me point out to the good gentleman, Article 12, Section 29. Article 12, Section 29. It provides, the Bangsamoro government may enter into economic agreements and receive benefits and grants derived therefrom, as provided in Section 1, Article 5 of this basic law. Is this not the capacity to enter into economic agreements with sovereign states?
So, to be clarified, it is economic and not political agreements.
Whether it is economic or political, the fact is it is being signed by an entity which is a government. But whether the agreement is political or economic is beside the point. It is the act of entering into that agreement which is material.
Mr. President, even local government units are allowed to come up with agreements with embassies. I'll give you an example. Bukidnon has a very large bilateral agreement with the New Zealand government for the Bukidnon Forest Incorporated, which is a man-made forest plantation to protect the biodiversity and the watersheds of Mount Kitanglad and Mount Kalatungan.
Okay.
And many others. We have bilateral, Malay-Balay has sister city agreements wherein they make reference with other countries, other cities in other countries, giving aid to one another, Mr. President. Local government units are allowed. And I think the reason for this, Mr. President, is that one day, the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region would like to come up with agreements maybe with Malaysia, with Indonesia for assistance and aid. As a matter of fact, I've met already with USAID, and they've already signified the intent to help with the systems programming and planning for the new Bangsamoro government. So we're giving them the leeway, Mr. President. These are not political agreements. These are more economic agreements, Your Honor.
Okay, we will study that further. But just to give us some degree of assurance, can we, at the appropriate time, can the gentleman accept an amendment on Article 4, Section 1, on self-governance, and insert as the last part of the sentence the phrase within the framework of the Constitution and the national sovereignty and territorial integrity of the Republic of the Philippines, so that Section 1, Article 4 will now read as follows: self-governance. In the exercise of its right to self-determination and self-governance, the Bangsamoro is free to pursue its political, economic, social, and cultural development, within the framework of the Constitution and the national sovereignty and national territory of the Republic of the Philippines.
We accept, Mr. President.
All right. So that it is not only found in the preamble, but also in the body of the law.
Yes, Mr. President, we accept the proper time. Very reasonable.
We will approve at the proper time.
Yes, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I think many of our colleagues are already tired. They have gone home. Maybe I can suspend this interpellation, and just as an advance notice, we'll talk about the asymmetrical and associative relationship in the next
Okay, Mr. President.
session, Mr. President. With the permission of the gentleman, I suspend my availment of the period of interpolation to resume at some future time to be determined by the majority leader.
I thank the good majority leader, Mr. President, for giving me his time and allowing him to expound on his questions today. I know he's still set for next week, but we appreciate it, Mr. President.
With the permission of the majority leader and the sponsor, can
Yes,
I
of
ask,
course,
can I
Mr.
ask a
President.
question?
Absolutely.
connected-
I would not, actually, I'm ready to stay till 4 in the morning,
I
Mr.
know,
President,
I know.
unfortunately.
In connection with one of the topics touched upon by the minority leader,
Yes, Mr. President.
Article 2, Section 1 talks about ascription or self-ascription. Can you tell us how that works?
Article,
On Bangsamoro identity, Section 1, Article 2. Ascription or self-ascription, how does that work?
can I ask for, to be clear
Yes.
and precise, I'll ask for 1 minute.
Session suspended. Ano mag-uot ka? Di na. Mag-uot ka? Di na. Do you execute the document? Kasi how will I know?
Senator Rob, baka gusto mo ng inscription, gagamitin mo yung lumad as an example. That is what people call them. Inscription. Like Cebuanos, but by self-ascription, they want to be called. Mr. President, ready to resume. Mr. President.
Session is resumed. Yung natanong na, ayoko na.
The explanation given to me by our dear colleagues in the BTC as well as our legal team is when you say by ascription, it is the identity given to you. For example, if you are Lumad, you're Lumad. You're Bisaya, Bisaya. If you're Ilonggo, Ilonggo. Ilocano, Ilocano. By self-ascription is what you want to be called.
Okay.
It's or how you want to be identified. So, hindi automatic. It's what they want to be identified.
So that person who wants to identify by self-ascription needs to execute a document?
No, sir. No, sir.
No formal election.
No formal election, no formal document. It's just a, it is a,
So how do
it's
we
a
know,
concept.
how will we know that he has chosen that identity? He has to make some act, huh?
By usage and act, Mr. President. That is their explanation to me, Mr. President.
Yes, some,
There's no formal election or oath to bank. Kasi citizenship na yan po, sir. Once we go further and forward, then you're talking about citizenship, you're talking about you're talking about already a document which is similar to being a member of a country or republic. Hindi po. This is just an explanation that the Bangsamoro, by ascription, that they're identified as Bangsamoro, or those for example, who want to be identified as Bangsamoro. Again, the Christians living in Cotabato City may want to choose to be called Bangsamoro because they sympathize with the setup and the cost and the development. One day, Mr. President, if we do this well and we do this right, and the funds are spent wisely, and I will show you during the interpellation of Senator Ralph Recto how during times of peace, the GDP of the Bangsamoro area is tremendously high. As a matter of fact, now, as we speak, according to the DBM and according to ARM, the GDP growth rate of the Bangsamoro region is 7.2% higher than the national average. This was told to us yesterday. But if you look at the graph, when Mama Sapano hit, nag-1, bagsak. When the all-out war in 2000 hit, -5. We'll show you the bagsak. So in times of conflict, no investments come in, no development comes in. I will foresee a day, Mr. President, once the guns are silent, once the development is put in place, once the investors are excited to come in, there will be members in Cotabato City who are Christian, there will be members in Basilan, in Isabela, who are now not members of ARM, who will be proud to be called Bangsamoro. It's like the Malaysians. When I meet people from Malaysia who are Hindu or Indian descent, Chinese descent, even Malay descent, all of them are Malaysians. They're happy to be called.
By living with the Maranaos and by living with the Tausugs.
Yes, probably also by living in
as one
their
community.
territory. Yes.
So if there is no specific procedure to exercise the choice to identify as Bangsamoro, how about the freedom of choice in Section 2? Is there a specific procedure or document to be executed by those who
po.
want to exercise
None, sir.
their freedom of choice?
None, sir.
Also
But
none.
This is a request, this Section 2 was a request by those who live in the territory but do not want to be identified, or I do not want to be, not naman identified, but that's not the right way of saying it. They do not want to be called the Bangsamoro.
Identified. I think the correct term I think is identified.
Identified,
Yes.
yes. Bangsamoro. I was trying to look for a more
So-
diplomatic,
And we can,
Word
yeah,
for it.
and then we can see this from their lifestyle, from the conduct of their daily life. We
Well,
will
if-
see.
some IPs, for example, do not want to lose their identity. So, kung Bagobo, they live there, Bagobo kami. Or what are the IPs there? The Laduray? Huh? Lambangihan. Lambangihan. Are not necessarily Muslims, diba? They are not Moro.
But some would want it.
Yes. So, they want to continue their identity, Mr. President. And under the PBL, we allow them to retain their identity.
Mr. Sponsor, in the Bangsamoro Parliament, in the classification allocation of seats, for example, there are reserved seats and 2 reserved seats each for non-Moro indigenous peoples and settler communities.
Yes, Mr. President.
Now, I want to relate this so that I will understand more this Bangsamoro identity. So, these non-Moro indigenous people are not Bangsamoro people in Section 1 of Article 2. They are the ones who exercise their freedom of choice.
Yes, Mr. President.
Tama po ba yun?
Under Section 2. Yes, Mr. President. For example, the settlers, these are Christians, Mr. President. So we would like to have, for example, if one Christian would like to aspire for a sectoral representative of the Bangsamoro Parliament, under that section it is
Yes.
allowed. And they retain their identity. And that's why they can fall into that category,
Yun na
Mr.
nga po yun.
President.
Oo.
Opo.
So somebody who has by ascription or self-ascription identified himself as Bangsamoro will not be qualified for these 2 reserved seats for
Yes, Mr.
non-Moro
President.
indigenous people. So that's
Yes,
very
Mr.
clear.
President.
So I know.
It's reserved for the indigenous peoples, not identified or not Moro.
Yes, not Bangsamoro. That's why I'm asking this question, because we use the term Bangsamoro and then in the subsequent sections non-Moro. So
Yes.
But non-moro actually is the same as non-bangsamoro. That's the
Yes,
same.
Mr. President.
Okay, that's clear.
Yes.
Medyo ba- minority leader, is that clear? It's clear to me. Thank you very much, Mr. Sponsor.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, may we have a few minutes of suspension just to check on the other interpellators?
Okay. Thank you. Session suspended. Ako na at tanggalin ako.
Opo.
Bana.
We're ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, the Minority Leader will continue interpellations on Monday, but also Senator Recto and Senator Pangilinan are scheduled for Monday, Mr. President. In the meantime, I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill 1717.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Thank you. Mr. President, with the permission of the body, I move to resume consideration of Senate Bill 1390 under Committee Report Number 52.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, this is the measure on the Philippine HIV and AIDS Policy Act. The parliamentary status of the measure is that we have already closed the period of individual amendments, and clean copies were requested to be distributed to the body before we approve it on second reading. We have done so, Mr. President. However, I understand that Senator Hontiveros would like to introduce further individual amendments. So with that, Mr. President, may I move to reconsider the closure of the period of individual amendments?
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
So we're now in the period of individual amendments. Mr. President, I move to recognize Senator Risa Hontiveros.
Senator Ontiveros is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Majority Leader. Mr. President, just to be consistent with the deletion of Section 23, an amendment that the good Majority Floor Leader proposed and that I accepted, I move to delete Section 44B, which is the corresponding penalty for violation of the previously deleted Section 23. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. If it would be in order, Mr. President, good Majority Leader, I move to close the period of amendments for Senate Bill 1390. I so move.
Is there any-
We concur. We have no objection to the motion, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Therefore, Mr. President, I move to approve on second reading Senate Bill 1390 under Committee Report 52.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and good Majority
Thank
Leader.
you, Mr. President. Mr. President, last March 20, 2018, the distinguished Minority Leader, Senator Frank Relon, made a motion for the Committee on Rules to come up with a ruling on a provision of the Senate rules. This particular provision of the Senate rules being referred to by the Minority Leader is the third paragraph of Section 65, which states, "The provision to the contrary notwithstanding, when a committee bill is presented with a report, the reading of the same, together with the title of the bill, shall be considered as first reading." According to the Minority Leader, Mr. President, this provision of the Senate rules should be made consistent with the constitutional provision, particularly Section 26, Paragraph 2, Article 6, which provides that, quote, "No bill passed by either house shall become a law unless it has passed 3 readings on separate days, and printed copies thereof in its final form have been distributed to its members 3 days before its passage." End of quote. Now, Mr. President, the interpretation on the provision of Section 65, as requested by Senator Dillon, was apparently made in the light of the committee report sponsored by Senator Richard Gordon before we adjourn the session, which we will no longer specify. This apparently deviated with the constitutional provision of placing under pending bill into 3 readings. All right, now, to add to this, no less than the sponsor of the committee report, Senator Richard Gordon, who attached to his report an original bill as part of his committee's recommendations, and thus did not go through first reading because of the application of Section 65 of the Rules of the Senate, and has concurred and supported the observations of Senator Dillon. Now, Mr. President, your Rules Committee made a comprehensive study on the matter brought before us, which we also conferred and consulted the same with the concerned office of the Legislative Office in the Senate. After thorough discussions and study on the issue, the Rules Committee would like to report this to this body, its findings. Now, first finding, Mr. President, Section 65 of the Senate Rules appears to be vaguely worded, that it has been subjected to different interpretations. In fact, we were able to come across with a similar precedent during the 14th Congress in Plenary Session number 48, dated February 2, 2010, with Senator Zubiri acting as the majority leader, and I quote, Senator Zubiri, Mr. President, there being no other amendments, I move that we adopt Committee Report 254, the fertilizer scam investigation, including the recommendations, except on the recommendation to adopt the draft attached bills, which we have already been referred to other committees for further study and recommendations, if it is all right with the sponsor. End of quote. Now, the subject measure back in the 14th Congress, Mr. President, was coincidentally sponsored by Senator Richard Gordon during the time, which he likewise graciously accepted and agrees on. Now, going back, Mr. President, the different treatment of Section 65 back in 2010 is a clear indication that such provision in the Senate rules indeed is vaguely worded. Now, finding number 2. If we are to interpret Section 65 of the Senate rules by considering an attached bill of a committee report of a Senate inquiry being part of its recommendations to be in its first reading already, it will run counter to the constitutional provision which states that a bill should pass 3 readings. So with these findings, Mr. President, the recommendation, or to rule them on the matter raised by the minority leader, and in order to put to rest the confusion in the interpretation of Section 65 of the Senate rules, your Committee on Rules would like to move, and with the consent of the Chamber, to amend the wordings of Section 65 to read as follows. Section 65. When a substitute or consolidated bill is presented with the committee report, the reading of said report together with the title of the substitute or consolidated bill shall be considered as first reading. Let me just explain first, Mr. President. The idea behind this proposal or this proposed amendment is to limit the bills contemplated thereunder only to substitute bills and consolidated bills. Because the bills substituted or consolidated have already passed first reading, thereby complying with the constitutional requirement of 3 readings on separate days found in Section 26, Article 6 of the Constitution. So with that, Mr. President, I will not move for the adoption yet, and make sure that all the other members of the committee and Senate are appraised of this proposal of the Committee on Rules. Thank you, Mr. President.
Minority Leader, sir, I'll recognize.
May it please the Majority Leader, can the Majority Leader now read the Section 65 in its entirety with the proposed amendment? Page 40.
40.
40.
for the Section 65, reading of bills and joint resolutions, Section 65. For the purpose of this rule, bills shall be considered as read on first reading when they are read for transmittal to the corresponding committee. This provision to the contrary notwithstanding, when a committee bill is presented with a report, the reading of the same, together with the title of the bill, shall be considered as first reading. Ito yung ano eh, no? When and this is the proposal, Mr. President.
So the amendment is on the second paragraph, Mr. President, with the word, this provision.
One, two,
Where is
third.
the,
Third paragraph, Mr. President.
So it will be a third paragraph? A new paragraph, Mr. President, just for clarity.
Replace the third paragraph, Mr. President. That is the proposal. Replace the third paragraph. After on first reading, what I read, Mr. President, was the previous Section 65, or the Section 65 as it is now.
Yes.
Now, the proposal would be, again, let me read the proposal already. Section 65, for the purpose of this rule, bills shall be considered as read, on first reading when they are read for transmittal to the corresponding committee, period. When a substitute or consolidated bill is presented with the committee report, the reading of said report, together with the title of the substitute or consolidated bill, shall be considered as first reading.
So, just to interrupt, the present provision is now deleted and substituted with what the good majority leader read. Is that a correct understanding?
Precisely, Mr. President.
And-
So that it is confined to only substitute bills and consolidated bills at hindi yung pagdating ng committee report biglang merong nanganak na bill.
Maliwanag po, Mr. President. So the third paragraph will not be amended. We said on second reading,
Yes.
etc., and the third paragraph on third reading will remain.
Yes, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have no objection to the proposed amendment.
But again, Mr. President, just to be consistent with our consensus with the group, we will move for the adoption on Monday, Mr. President, of the rules. So with that, Mr. President, we ask that the Secretariat provide all the members of the Senate this proposed amendment.
The Secretariat is directed.
Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the additional reference of business.
Additional reference of business bills on first reading, 1769, entitled An Act Establishing the Medical Assistance Program for the Dingvaxia vaccines and appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes. Senator Joseph Victor Ejercito.
Refer to the Committees on Health and Demography and Finance.
1770, an act to enhance public financial management in local government units by amending certain provisions in Republic Act 7160, otherwise known as the Local Government Code of 1991, Senator Sani Angara.
Refer to the Committees on Local Government and Finance.
1771, an act to enhance the taxing powers of local government units by amending certain provisions in Book 2 of Republic Act 7160, otherwise known as the Local Government Code of 1991, Senator Sani Angara.
Refer to the Committees on Local Government and Ways and Means.
1772, an act providing for business-friendly tax remedies in local government units by amending certain provisions in Book 2 of Republic Act 7160, otherwise known as the Local Government Code of 1991, Senator Sani Angara.
Refer to the Committees on Local Government and Ways and Means.
1773, an act to rationalize credit financing for local government units by amending certain provisions in Book 2 of Republic Act 7160, otherwise known as the Local Government Code of 1991. Senator Sani Angara.
Refer to the Committees on Local Government and Banks, Financial Institutions, and Currencies.
1774, an act to reduce the cost of doing business in local government units by amending certain provisions in Book 2 of Republic Act 7160, otherwise known as the Local Government Code of 1991. Senator Sani Angara.
Refer to the Committees on Local Government and Trade, Commerce, and Entrepreneurship.
1775, an act to simplify local taxes, to enhance tax compliance in local government units by amending certain provisions in Book 2 of Republic Act 7160, otherwise known as the Local Government Code of 1991. Senator Sani Angara.
Refer to the Committees on Local Government and Ways and Means.
1776, an act institutionalizing people's participation in the budget process, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes. Senator Grace Poe.
Refer to the Committee on Finance.
1777, an act amending Republic Act number 9006, otherwise known as the Fair Election Act. Senator Aquilino Coco Pimentel III.
Refer to the Committee on Electoral Reforms and People's Participation.
1778, an act granting the Philippine citizenship to Hans Günther Scoop. Senator Aquilino Coco Pimentel III.
Refer to the Committee on Rules.
1779, an act providing for a 3,000 peso increase across the board in the monthly pension of war veterans and their dependents, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes. Senator Joel Villanueva.
Refer to the Committees on National Defense and Security and Finance.
Resolutions. Resolution number 700, resolution expressing the sense of the Senate to call upon the private sector to hire graduates of the reformed K-12 basic education system to enable fresh graduates to find decent and fulfilling employment, and to ensure the successful implementation of Republic Act number 10533, otherwise known as the Enhanced Basic Education Act of 2013. Senator Grace Poe.
Refer to the Committee on Rules.
701, resolution urging the Senate Committee on Public Information and Mass Media to conduct an assessment in aid of legislation in the efforts to score its first nomination and win in the prestigious Oscar Awards and the Renaissance of Philippine Cinema. Senator Grace Poe.
Refer to the Committee on Public Information and Mass Media.
702, resolution urging the President of the Philippines to create the Presidential Office on Drugs and Crimes. Senator Soto III.
Refer to the Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs.
703, resolution directing the Senate Committee on Tourism to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the compliance of accommodation establishments such as hotels, resorts, apartment hotels, and recreation areas in providing on-site first aid and emergency medical services, and to review the applicable guidelines and rules and regulations thereof in order to reassure tourists and guests of their safety and protection. Senator Grace Poe.
Refer to the Committee on Tourism.
704, resolution directing the appropriate Senate committees to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the inflationary impact and effect on the economy of the implementation of the tax reform for acceleration and inclusion law. Senator Paulo Benigno Bam Aquino IV.
Refer to the Committee on Ways and Means and Economic Affairs.
705, resolution directing the Senate Committee on Tourism and other appropriate Senate committees to look into, in aid of legislation, the administration's rehabilitation plan on Boracay, and further assess the readiness of the Department of Tourism, Department of Interior and Local Government, Department of Public Works and Highways, Department of Trade and Industry, Department of Social Welfare and Development, Department of Labor and Employment, and other related government agencies in assisting the residents of Boracay, the workers, and the business establishments that will be affected by the impending 6-month closure of the island, with the end in view of determining whether there is a need for a remedial legislation, and we are closing Boracay entirely for 6 months in the best approach in rehabilitating the island, and is not a thoughtless decision made on a whim to favor certain individuals, groups, and ensuring that those who are said to be affected, if this push is through, will be provided with adequate assistance, including but not limited to livelihood, employment, and relocation if needed. Senator Trillanes IV.
Refer to the Committees on Tourism and Local Government. Majority Leader,
Second.
please proceed.
Second additional reference of business. Bills on first reading. 1780, an act ordaining a system to ensure available doctors and healthcare in undeserved and geographically disadvantaged areas by creating a medical scholarship and return service program for deserving students and appropriating funds therefore. Senator Grace Poe.
Refer to the Committee on Health and Demography, Education, Arts and Culture and Finance.
1781, an act to establish programs in assisting elderly and senior citizens who are victims of violence and abuse, and to provide training mechanisms and funds therefore. Senator Grace Poe.
Refer to the Committee on Social Justice, Welfare and Rural Development and Finance.
1782, an act designating the Secretary of the Department of Agriculture as chairperson of the governing board of the National Food Authority. Senator Recto.
Refer to the Committee on Agriculture and Food.
1783, an act designating the Secretary of the Department of Agriculture as chairperson of the governing board of the National Irrigation Administration, amending for the purpose Section 4 of Republic Act Number 3601 as amended. Senator Recto.
Refer to the Committees on Agriculture and Food and Public Works.
1784, an act strengthening the system of people's initiative and referendum, amending for the purpose of Republic Act Number 6735, otherwise known as an act providing for the system of initiative and referendum and appropriating funds therefore. Senator Pimentel III.
Refer to the Committees on Electoral Reform and People's Participation and Constitutional Amendments and Revision of Codes.
1785, an act to strengthen human rights education and the system of legal assistance for migrant workers, amending for the purpose Section 23 of Republic Act Number 8042, otherwise known as the Migrant Workers and Overseas Filipinos Act of 1995 as amended. Senator Laila M. de Lima.
Refer to the Committees on Labor, Employment and Human Resources and Foreign Relations.
1786, an act to enhance inter-LGU cooperation by amending certain provisions in Book 1 of Republic Act 7160, otherwise known as the Local Government Code of 1991. Senator Sani Angara.
Refer to the Committee on Local Government.
1787, an act updating the requisites for the creation of municipalities, cities, and provinces by amending certain provisions in Book 3 of Republic Act 7160, otherwise known as the Local Government Code of 1991. Senator Sani Angara.
Refer to the Committee on Local Government.
1788, an act to enhance the share of local government units in internal revenue taxes. Senator Sani Angara.
Refer to the Committee on Local Government and Ways and Means.
1789, an act to enhance the use of national wealth for local development by amending certain provisions in Book 2 of Republic Act 7160, otherwise known as the Local Government Code of 1991. Senator Sani Angara.
Refer to the Committee on Local Government.
1790, an act to rationalize the functional assignments of local government units by amending certain provisions in Republic Act 7160, otherwise known as the Local Government Code of 1991. Senator Sani Angara.
Refer to the Committee on Local Government.
1791, an act strengthening the court system in the Philippines, amending for the purpose Sections 4 and 8 of Republic Act Number 6758, otherwise known as the Compensation and Position Classification Act of 1989 as amended, thereby exempting the judiciary from said law. Senator Grace Poe.
Refer to the Committees on Justice and Human Rights, Civil Service, Government Reorganization, and Professional Regulation and Finance.
1792, an act mandating all employees in the private and public sectors, including all government offices, agencies, and instrumentalities, to provide free of charge, clean, healthy, sufficient, and accessible drinking water to all its employees. Senator Grace Poe.
Refer to the Committee on Labor, Employment, and Human Resource Development and Civil Service Government, Reorganization, and Professional Regulation.
1793, an act amending sections 28, 38, and 39 of Republic Act Number 7305, otherwise known as the Magna Carta of Public Health Workers. Senator Laila M. De Lima.
Refer to the Committees on Health and Demography and Finance.
1794, an act appropriating the sum of 1,161,710,000 pesos as supplemental appropriations for fiscal year 2018 and for other purposes. Senator Ligarda.
Refer to the Committee on Finance.
1795, an act appropriating the sum of 1,161,710,000 pesos as supplemental appropriations for fiscal year 2018 and for other purposes. Senator Richard J. Gordon.
Refer to the Committee on Finance.
1796, an act creating an election code recodification committee to recodify the election laws. Senator Laila M. De Lima.
Refer to the Committees on Electoral Reforms and People's Participation, Constitutional Amendments, and Revision of Codes and Finance.
1797, an act amending sections 16A and 16B of Republic Act Number 9231, otherwise known as an act providing for the elimination of the worst forms of child labor and affording stronger protection for the working child. Amending for this purpose Republic Act Number 7610 as amended, otherwise known as the Special Protection of Children Against Child Abuse, Exploitation, and Discrimination Act. Senator Joel Villanueva.
Refer to the Committees on Labor, Employment, and Human Resources Development, and Women, Children, Family Relations, and Gender Equality.
Resolutions. Number 7606, resolution expressing the full support of the Senate of the Philippines for the worldwide walk to fight poverty, spearheaded by the Felix Y. Manalo Foundation, Inc. of the Iglesia ni Cristo. Senator Sani Angara.
Refer to the Committee on Rules.
707, resolution recognizing and commending the contributions of Iglesia ni Cristo founder and first executive minister Felix Isagun Manalo. Senator Sani Angara.
Refer to the Committee on Rules.
708, resolution directing the Senate Committee on Urban Planning, Housing, and Resettlement to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the alleged irregularities on resettlement and relocation programs undertaken by the government for disaster-affected areas, with the end in view of crafting an alternative policy to ensure efficiency, transparency, and accountability in post-disaster rehabilitation and recovery. Joseph Victor Ejercito.
Refer to the Committee on Urban Planning, Housing, and Resettlement.
709, resolution directing the Senate Committee on Health and Demography to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the reported shortage of anti-rabies vaccines, the policies, plans, and programs to prevent an outbreak of rabies-related diseases, and to review the implementation of Republic Act Number 9482, otherwise known as the Anti-Rabies Act of 2007. Senator Grace Poe.
Refer to the Committee on Health and Demography.
710, resolution urging the Senate Committee on Environment and Natural Resources to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the rehabilitation of Banawi rice terraces, within in view of formulating policies to promote its sustainable development. Senator Grace Poe.
Refer to the Committee on Environment and Natural Resources.
711, resolution directing the Senate Committee on Banks, Financial Institutions, and Currencies to conduct an inquiry on the economic status and investment impacts of cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin in the light of a 900 million pyramiding scam that was unearthed recently, with the end in view of reducing the risks of fraud, promoting financial literacy on digital currencies, and protecting the public. Senator Grace Poe.
Refer to the Committee on Banks, Financial Institutions, and Currencies, and Trade, Commerce, and Entrepreneurship.
712, resolution directing the Senate Committee on Public Order and Illegal Drugs to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the alleged illegal withholding of daily subsistence allowance and explosive ordnance disposal hazardous pay allotted to the members of the Special Action Force troopers amounting to 59.8 million, within in view of proposing remedial legislation to address the same and prevent the recurrence of the same incident in the future that may cause demoralization among the ranks of the Philippine National Police. Senator Lacson.
Refer to the Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs.
713, resolution directing the Committee on Public Services to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the operation of transport network companies in the Philippines, particularly on the alleged overcharging of fees and non-implementation of student and persons with disability discounts, with the in view of crafting legislation regulating transportation network vehicle services in the country. Senator Joseph Victor Ejercito.
Refer to the Committee on Public Services.
714, resolution commending and honoring the 8 outstanding Filipinos who brought glory and prestige to the Philippines by being awardees of the recent Asian Scientist 100. Senator Laila M. De Lima.
Refer to the Committee on Rules.
715, resolution directing the appropriate Senate committee to conduct an investigation in aid of legislation on the administration's order to close off Boracay Island for 6 months and to inquire into the government measures, if any, to address the effects of the closure of the Philippine economy and the Filipino people. Senator Laila M. De Lima.
Refer to the Committees on Environment and Natural Resources and Local Government.
716, resolution calling on the Senate to convene the Congressional Commission on Health pursuant to Republic Act number 7305, otherwise known as the Magna Carta of Public Health Workers. Senator Laila M. De Lima.
Refer to the Committee on Health and Demography.
717, resolution directing the appropriate Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the implementation of Republic Act number 8172, otherwise known as ASIN law, and its effects on health and the local salt industry, with the end in view of striking a balance between promoting iodine sufficiency among our people and strengthening mechanisms to enhance local salt production. Senator Laila M. De Lima.
Refer to the Committees on Health and Demography and Trade, Commerce, and Entrepreneurship.
718, resolution urging the government to fully support the local cocoa industry in order to take advantage of the rising global demand for cocoa beans and related products, and in doing so generate employment and income for cocoa farmers and their families, contribute to regreening the countryside, and promote inclusive growth. Senator Grace Poe.
Refer to the Committee on Agriculture and Food.
719, resolution directing the Senate Committee on Public Services to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the policies, plans, penalty system, and remedial measures that can be formulated on the increasing cases of abusive drivers in Grab, PH, taxis, and other common carriers, considering that the present relevant statutes mandate that they are bound to observe extraordinary diligence for the safety and protection of passengers. Senator Grace Poe.
Refer to the Committee on Public Services.
720, resolution directing the appropriate Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the issue of rice smuggling and procurement policy shifts on rice importation with the end in view of ensuring that the National Food Authority implements mechanisms and policies that are consistent and duly safeguarded against corruption. Senator Laila M. De Lima.
Refer to the Committee on Agriculture and Food.
721, resolution directing the proper Senate committees to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on advertisement placements made by the Department of Tourism with television networks and media agencies. Senator Maria Lourdes Nancy is B9.
Refer to the Committee on Accountability of Public Officers and Investigations.
722, resolution urging the Senate Committee on National Defense and Security to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on China's installation of missile systems on 3 fortified outposts in the Spratly Islands, which is being claimed by the Philippines, with the end in view of asserting the country's sovereignty and territorial integrity, and ensuring that this militarization by China does not pose any threat to the Philippines' defense and security. Senator Trillanes IV.
Refer to the Committees on National Defense and Security and Foreign Relations.
723, resolution directing the appropriate Senate committees to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation into China's installation of missiles on Mischief Panganiban Reef, Subi Zamora Reef, and Fiery Cross Kagitingan Reef, and the direction of our foreign policy, with the end in view of protecting our sovereign rights and preserving our national security and interests. Senator Paulo Benigno Bamaquino IV.
Refer to the Committees on National Defense and Security and Foreign Relations.
724, resolution recognizing and congratulating San Miguel Alab, Pilipinas for winning the 2018 Asian Basketball League. Senator Joel Villanueva.
Refer to the Committee on Rules.
725, resolution directing the appropriate Senate committees to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation into the rules and conditions for the admission and deportation of foreign nationals, to ensure that these do not unjustly curtail their basic human rights, including freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and the right to peaceful assembly. Senator Paulo Benigno Bam Aquino IV.
Refer to the Committee on Justice and Human Rights.
726, resolution urging the Senate Committee on Tourism to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the anomalous 60 million advertisement placement made by the Department of Tourism with Bitag Media Unlimited Inc. for airtime in Kilos Pronto, a PTV4 program produced and co-hosted by the brothers of DOT Secretary Wanda Teo, with the end in view of ensuring that the budget allocated to DOT marketing for its, particularly for its expenditures in advertising and marketing, are legally and properly disbursed and spent. Senator Trillanes IV.
Refer to the Committee on Accountability of Public Officers and Investigation.
Mr. President,
Majority Leader.
upon the request of Senator Honasan, the Chair of the Committee on National Defense, and after getting the consent of Senator Loren Legarda, I was informed earlier, and both authors of PS Resolutions 722 and 723, Senator Trillanes and Senator Bamaquino. May I move to transfer the referrals of PS Resolution 722 and 723 from the Committee on National Defense as primary to the Committee on Foreign Relations as primary and the Defense as secondary. So move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we adjourn the session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Monday, May 21, 2018.
Session is adjourned.